Hello and welcome. Before we get into today's stories, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. A white Chevrolet Silverado drove past an acupuncture clinic just before sunset. 24 hours later, police would be calling it the center of a murder investigation. John Satoshi Tokahara was born on February 13th, 1974, in Honolulu, Hawaii. He grew up with his parents, Walter and Lily, and his sister Lee. After graduating from Waipahu High School, he moved to Oregon to attend the University of Portland, earning a bachelor's degree in biology. He went on to complete a master's degree in Chinese medicine and acupuncture at the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine. Eventually, he returned to Hawaii and opened his own practice, Tokahara Acupuncture and Healthcare, in Waipahu. John never married but dated a number of women over the years, including several who were already married, something that earned him more than a few enemies in his community. Another central figure in this story is Eric Thompson. Born in 1987 in Hawaii, Eric began dating a fellow student named Joyce in 2003 while they were in high school. 14 years later, on February 14th, 2017, they finally married. Eric earned a biology degree and later built a successful high-end bathtub renovation business. He and Joyce lived comfortably in a $1.6 million home and were trying to start a family, though they faced challenges. In 2019, Joyce went to see John Tokahara for fertility treatment and relief from back pain. On June 9th, 2020, she gave birth to a daughter, Emma. After the birth, she struggled with low mood and returned to John for more acupuncture sessions. It was during this period that she and John began an affair, something John was quite accustomed to. They communicated through John's Instagram account, where Joyce was his only follower. Between May and July 2021, they exchanged thousands of messages, including intimate photos. They frequently discussed their affair, and Joyce told John she feared her husband would eventually uncover it. John wanted a long-term relationship, but Joyce made it clear she wasn't leaving Eric, even though she wanted the affair to continue. In July 2021, Eric noticed suspicious activity on his home's video surveillance system, which led him to discover the affair. He was understandably angry. Joyce told John through Instagram that Eric had found out and that everything had to stop. Their last message was exchanged on July 23, 2021. On August 22, 2021, Joyce attempted to FaceTime John, but he didn't answer. It appeared their connection had fully ended. Months later, in December 2021, Joyce signed a postnuptial agreement that granted Eric ownership of everything, including their home and full custody of Emma, should they divorce. She had a habit of consulting psychics, and Eric later claimed Joyce told him a psychic instructed her to have the affair with John. She also agreed she would stop seeking advice from psychics altogether. On January 12, 2022, John's mother Lily texted him, asking him to pick up dinner at her house after work. At 6:12 p.m, John sent her a message, his last. He never arrived to pick up dinner. Lily texted him again at 8:34 p.m. and at 9:32 p.m, asking if he was okay. He never responded. The next morning, January 13th, Lily went to his office around 8 a.m. She noticed John's white Toyota Tacoma parked outside. She entered through the back door and found John unresponsive on the floor with blood around his head. She immediately left the building and called 911. Police arrived at 8:11 a.m. Investigators discovered that John had been shot several times in the face. 3 spent .22 long rifle casings were found at the scene, suggesting the use of a semi-automatic firearm, though nothing more about the weapon was immediately known. A backpack near John's body contained $3,900 in cash. John might have had a gambling habit, which could explain why he carried so much cash. His phone was unlocked at 6:18 p.m. on January 12th, and no activity occurred after that. That was 6 minutes after he sent his final text to Lily. Surveillance video showed a white 4-door Chevrolet Silverado crew cab driving within 140 feet of John's clinic at 5:57 p.m. on January 12th. The truck turned east, then north, and at 5:58 p.m, it moved out of camera view near an intersection roughly 600 feet northeast of the office. At 6:10 p.m, a person appeared on video walking toward the office from that intersection. The individual wore dark clothing, sunglasses and a white bucket hat, and carried a large brown paper shopping bag with handles. They approached the front door, which stayed locked, paced briefly as though unsure of what to do, then walked around to the back of the building where the office's rear entrance was located. At 6:15 p.m, the person entered the office. Just 48 seconds later, they exited, still holding the paper bag, and walked back the way they came. About 250 feet from the office, the white bucket hat fell off. The person didn't bother picking it up and kept walking. At 6:20 p.m, they reached the intersection 600 feet away and disappeared from view. A minute later, the same white Silverado appeared in the camera frame near that intersection, suggesting that the person seen on foot was likely the driver. A homeless man later picked up the bucket hat from the street. No other individuals were caught on video entering or leaving John's office until Lily arrived at 8 a.m. the next day. Police concluded that the unknown individual was responsible for John's death. They located the homeless man, retrieved the hat, and submitted it for DNA testing. As investigators reviewed John's phone, they found the Instagram account he used to message Joyce. This immediately put Eric Thompson on their radar due to the obvious motive. When questioned, Eric claimed he was dropping off bricks at a dump during the time of the murder, and then went to a drugstore where he made a cash purchase. Police could not confirm his movements. On February 14, 2022, 34-year-old Eric Thompson was arrested on suspicion of a murder. His first trial took place in the summer of 2023. On August 4th, it resulted in a mistrial after the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict. The split was 9-3 in favour of guilt.
The tragedy has really brought the community together, I think, in Waipahu. And so, the community, our friends, everybody has just rallied together and shown so much support for the family.
He's an acupuncturist, and so he's a healer, and he's helped so many people in the community.
He had friends in so many different circles, and he was just someone that was just loved. He gave back to his community, gave scholarships.
He's all about the people. He's all about the community. And you guys, he just stripped that away. But now he's going to take the love we have for him or the love he had for us away. God bless us all.
Eric was retried in early 2025. On February 25th, he was convicted of second-degree murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. On June 27th, 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years.
He reacted. What was he saying? Because
I love you.
How many times was he struck before you said he kind of lost consciousness?
At least 2 or 3 times I was hitting him with his arms. He had his arms up. And he's so tough, he's taking him with his arms.
What was he saying?
He's down on the ground, he says, I love you. And I go, where? Right here on the butt. And he goes, and then I just killed him. Hit him a couple more times and took a knife.
So before he lost consciousness, that he was saying to you the whole time as you were striking was that I love you, I love you.
He told me a couple of times, I love you.
Yeah.
Today's story stands apart from the usual cases we cover, where suspects often lie, deny involvement, or try to manipulate the truth. In this case, the suspect is strikingly different. He openly confesses to every detail of his actions. While honesty might seem like a positive trait in this context, it's deeply unsettling and chilling. On the morning of November 11th, 2023, police in Ohio rushed to the Gulia home after a 911 call reported an unresponsive man. What they found inside was chaos wrapped in silence. Theodore Gulia, the patriarch of the family, was lying upstairs, cold to the touch and bearing obvious signs of violence. His wife, Anna, had been the one to call. She explained to officers that she had spent the previous day with her daughter Claire and only returned home around 10 a.m. that morning. The house should have been quiet, ordinary. Instead, she walked straight into a nightmare. Her husband was lifeless, and her son, Robert J. Gulia, had been the only one home with him. Police quickly noted the unease in the house. Theodore's injuries suggested blunt force trauma, but the positioning of the body raised questions. Blood patterns hinted that he hadn't died where he was found, but rather had been moved. Already the story was shifting into something darker. The scene was not just a tragedy. It was the beginning of an investigation that would tear apart the Gulia family from the inside. The house was silent except for the shuffle of officers moving through its rooms, documenting every detail. Theodore Gulia's body lay cold and battered, clear evidence of a violent struggle. His head and face showed signs of blunt force trauma, but the positioning of the body told another story. It didn't belong where it was found. Blood on the hallway walls contrasted with the body staged in the bedroom, making it obvious that someone had moved him. Whoever did this wasn't just killing. They were trying to rewrite the scene. Almost immediately, suspicion began to settle on one name, Robert Gulia, better known as RJ. He had been the last one with his father, and his story didn't line up with what investigators were piecing together. His mother, Anna, insisted she had stayed the night at her daughter Claire's house, returning late the next morning only to stumble upon the horror. His brother Ben was at work until he rushed home, devastated by the news. That left only RJ alone with their father during the critical hours. And yet, when questioned, Robert spun a version of events that bordered on the unbelievable. He claimed he'd been calling his mother for cigarettes that morning, that he had heard noises in the night but thought little of them, and, most bizarrely, that someone else must have broken in to kill his father and left the scene in a way that would frame him. It was the kind of story that sounded like a bad excuse the moment it left his mouth. Detectives knew it, his own family knew it, his owner. And before long, Robert would be sitting in an interrogation room, facing the questions that would break apart his lies. When detectives finally sat Robert down in the interrogation room, the tension was heavy. At first, he stuck to his story. Someone had broken in, someone else had killed his dad, and somehow he was just the unlucky one left behind to look guilty. But the officers weren't buying it. His answers were inconsistent, and every detail he gave seemed to unravel under even the simplest questioning. The shift came when detectives pressed him about the blood, the body being moved, and the obvious signs of staging. Slowly, Robert began to bend. He admitted he had struck his father, though at first he tried to soften it, claiming he just wanted the pain to end, that he hadn't meant for things to go so far. But then the confessions tumbled out. He described grabbing a steel baseball bat, hitting his father as he sat unsuspecting. He recalled breaking his arm, knocking him to the ground, and then, almost casually, pulling a knife to cut his father's throat, claiming it was to end it quickly.
He took a knife and just tried to slit his throat because I didn't want him to feel any more pain.
What stood out most wasn't just what Robert said, but how he said it. His tone was flat, detached, like he was explaining a chore instead of a murder. He even admitted to dragging the body, crossing his father's arms as if arranging him for some twisted ritual, before covering his face. At moments, he'd slip into regret, saying he didn't know why he did it, insisting it felt like something had snapped in his head. But those flickers of emotion only made the rest of his cold recounting more chilling. Detectives kept him talking, encouraging his confessions by nodding and reassuring him he was doing the right thing. They knew they were sitting across from someone with no real remorse, just fear of what came next. Robert wasn't broken down by guilt. He was broken down by being caught. As the hours dragged on, Robert grew more comfortable speaking, almost as though confessing gave him relief. He admitted that there wasn't an argument, no heated exchange leading up to the attack. Instead, he claimed it was a sudden impulse, describing it as if something snapped in his mind. He said he stood behind his father, baseball bat in hand, and decided in that moment to kill him. He struck Theodore again and again, first at his arms as his father raised them in defense. Theodore's desperate words, "I love you, man," echoed in the room as Robert repeated them for detectives. His father had said it more than once, trying to reach the son who was mercilessly beating him. But Robert didn't stop. He told investigators he kept swinging until his father collapsed, then used a knife to try to end it quickly. What chilled the detectives wasn't just the violence, but the way Robert described it. He spoke of his father's toughness, how he took the blows, almost admiring the man he was killing.
2 or 3 times I was hitting him in his arms, had his arms up, and he's so tough, just taking him in his arms.
What was he saying?
He's down on the ground, he says, I love you.
He admitted that once the attack was over, he couldn't stand the sight of the body. So he dragged his father into a bedroom, positioned him in the shape of a cross, and covered his face with a piece of clothing, claiming it was to show respect because of his father's faith. At times, Robert slipped into self-pity. He said he wished he could hug his dad again, that he hadn't meant for it to go so far, but those words rang hollow. His description of washing the bat in the sink, of casually pointing out where the knife still sat on the desk, showed how little true remorse he felt. By now, detectives understood they weren't dealing with a son who had lost control in the heat of an argument. They were sitting across from someone who had made a choice, cold, deliberate and final. And despite his moments of feigned regret, it was clear that Robert was not sorry for killing his father. He was only sorry that now there was no way back. Once detectives had Robert's confession on record, everything else fell into place. The crime scene told the same story his words had painted. Bloodstains mapped the path of the attack. The sink still bore traces of the bat he had rinsed, and the knife sat exactly where he said it would be. Forensic teams confirmed Theodore's cause of death. Blunt force trauma to the head with multiple fractures, followed by stab wounds that showed a desperate attempt to end what the beating had already started. The community was stunned. Theodore Nelson was remembered as a hard-working father, a man who had done his best to provide, and now the son he had raised was being charged with his murder. News reports painted the case as both brutal and senseless, sparking debates about youth violence, mental health, and the fragile line between family bonds and unthinkable betrayal. Robert faced a long list of charges, but the most serious was second-degree murder. His defense team tried to argue diminished capacity, pointing to his odd behavior and emotional instability, but the jury wasn't swayed. The brutality of the attack, the lack of remorse, and his own matter-of-fact confession left little doubt. He was convicted and handed a lengthy prison sentence, one that would keep him behind bars for most of his life. In the end, the case of Robert Nelson was less about motive and more about the horror of the act itself. No one could ever fully explain why he turned on his father that day. Some believed it was buried resentment, others thought it was the crack of untreated mental illness. But what everyone agreed on was this: the crime had torn apart more than just one life. It left a family destroyed, a community shaken, and a father's final words, "I love you, man," haunting the story forever. Today, the case of Robert stands as one of those tragedies that people still struggle to wrap their heads around. He remains in prison, serving the sentence that followed his conviction, and very little has changed in terms of public understanding. There was never a clear motive, no inheritance dispute, no long history of abuse, no financial desperation that usually explains parricide. Instead, it was an act of sudden and shocking violence that left everyone searching for answers that never came. It was late on July 25th, 2023, when officers in Rock Island, Illinois, pulled up to a modest home after receiving a disturbing call. Someone had reported that a child inside may have accidentally shot themselves. The officers didn't know if the claim was real or just a cruel prank, but protocol required they check. When they knocked, 37-year-old Sushi Staples opened the door. She didn't look shocked or scared by the allegation. Instead, she rolled her eyes and snapped that it was harassment. Lies from her ex-husband's new girlfriend. Absolutely not. "I don't even have a son," she insisted. But the caller had given a name: Zion. Staples claimed she only lived there with her 4 daughters. The basement. Off limits. "You need a warrant," she said coldly. Her defensiveness stuck with the officers, especially her lack of surprise at the allegation. Most parents, if accused of hiding a dead child, would be panicked, desperate to prove otherwise. But Sushi brushed it off with practiced annoyance, blaming online stalkers and family drama.
He called DCFS.
What?
And kind of made some claims that you had a child that accidentally shot themselves?
Absolutely not.
No, it sounds crazy to me too. That's what.
I am so sorry about this. My ex-husband, his new girlfriend, this broad is off the chain. I have went down to Rock Island and filed a police report on her.
Okay.
I have went and put a restraining order on her.
What's her name?
Her name is Tony. This girl is never in it. She has so many different Facebook pages she stalks me from. She has made up different names, called me from different numbers. I have changed my number, tried to do everything I can.
So they made some allegation that you had a son and he shot himself.
Sir,
and he's in
come
your
on
basement.
now. You think, look where I live.
No, I get it. Just so I can check the box off, can I look in your basement real quick and I'll get out
No,
of here?
you need a search warrant to do that. I'm sorry, I'm not about to have my rights violated because someone makes Uranus allegations like this.
I know. Like I said, it sounded crazy to me too. I'm just up here.
With no legal grounds to force entry, the officers left. But they weren't convinced. The very next day, July 26th, police came back with a search warrant. This time, they weren't asking permission. Sushi was suddenly nervous. Her tone shifted from aggressive to scared, pleading to call family, insisting she didn't know why they were there.
Okay, I'm gonna open the door.
We'll all walk in casually. We're not gonna tear up your house or anything, so.
Calm down, my kids are in here.
Okay.
Please.
How many?
4.
And where at in the house?
They're upstairs. I just made them go upstairs. I don't want to scare my kids. Can we just calm
The
down?
officer's gonna walk in there with you then. I got a copy of the warrant out here for you.
Can I see the warrant, please? And I can call my lawyer. Can I see the warrant before we walk any further? I'm calm.
We have a valid search warrant, so.
I understand, but you haven't let me see it yet, and you're walking through my house.
It's right here. You don't run how we go. You're not controlling.
Okay, I'm trying to see. You all?
So, I need your phone too.
My phone? That's not my phone.
Well, that's the phone taking. Hold on to that. So,
Okay.
which rooms are your kids in? Obviously not.
They're upstairs. I am very cooperative. I'm not fighting anybody.
You're fine.
Look, I'm scared. My kids are
Going
here.
upstairs and checking.
My kids are here.
That's empty. Well, it's for an old heater. Do you know why we're here?
No, I don't. I don't know why you're here.
Okay.
I'm really scared because my kids are upstairs and I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
When asked again about Zion, she flatly denied his existence, then pivoted to another excuse. Someone had stolen her identity, she claimed, and maybe that's how his name showed up on benefits paperwork. Detectives pressed harder. Bit by bit, she cracked. "I need some help," she muttered, before admitting she'd used someone to make documents for her. Fraud, she suggested, but still, no child. While Sushi stalled upstairs, investigators searched the property. The garage drew their attention. In the corner sat a large trash can, oddly heavy and emitting a faint foul odour. When forensics pulled it away from the wall, they knew instantly what they had found. Inside, curled up in nothing but a pair of Spider-Man shorts, was the body of a young boy. Zion Staples was real after all, and his mother had hidden him in a garbage bin for months. 2 of Sushi's daughters broke the silence investigators had long suspected. Through quiet, scared voices, they told detectives what had happened. Zion had found their mother's gun, played with it, and accidentally shot himself. In shock, Sushi didn't call for help. Instead, she ordered her girls to help drag his body into the basement. They laid him in a bin beneath their own kitchen, where his siblings ate and lived, while Sushi stuffed dryer sheets into vents to mask the smell. Weeks later, when the odour became unbearable, she moved him to the garage. At the same time, she continued cashing in state benefits under his name. Authorities decided not to charge Sushi with murder. There wasn't clear evidence she had pulled the trigger, but her crimes were undeniable, concealing a child's death, obstruction, child endangerment, and fraud. The optics of her behaviour, the lies, the benefits, the way she erased Zion's existence, painted her as cold and calculating. In court, prosecutors described not just negligence, but a shocking lack of humanity. Facing trial, Sushi wavered between tears and denial. "I'm not a monster," she said. "I'm just a mother who fell and tried to get back up." She pled guilty to one charge, endangering the life of a child. The others were dropped. Her sentence? Just 2 years in prison. With time served, she would be out in under 18 months. At sentencing, she even complained it was too harsh, asking for probation instead. In the end, the truth about Zion came out not through his mother, but through the bravery of his sisters and the persistence of investigators. Sushi had tried to erase her own son, from her words, from her home, from her life.
Do you have a son named Zion?
No, I don't.
You've never had a son named Zion?
No.
Are you claiming benefits for a kid named Zion?
No. I haven't gotten any benefits for anyone.
But the evidence wouldn't stay buried. Zion's short existence was defined by a mother who lied about him, even in death. And though Sushi Staples walked away with a light sentence, the shadow of her choices will follow her and her children for the rest of their lives. The screen flickered to life. "Hey everyone, we're live!" A man in a Santa hat grinned at his camera, controller in hand, ready to stream hours of Grand Theft Auto, Vice City. It was December 18th, 2022, 1 week before Christmas, and dozens of subscribers tuned in to watch him play. To anyone watching, he was safe at home, joking about his sound levels, sipping soda, and blasting digital criminals across neon streets. But outside of YouTube, in the real world, something very different was happening. While the stream rolled on, while viewers dropped comments he couldn't see, the man on the screen was nowhere near his computer. The broadcast wasn't live. It had been recorded days earlier, set to play automatically, a perfect alibi. Because at that very same moment, in a quiet house in Silverwood Green, a young woman was fighting for her life. Neighbours later recalled hearing a scream at around 9 p.m. Police cameras caught the silhouette of a man entering the neighbourhood, heading directly to her home, as if he already knew where to go. Her name was Natalie McNally. She was 32 years old, 15 weeks pregnant, and that night she was ambushed in her own home, stabbed repeatedly, beaten, strangled. Defensive wounds showed she fought back with everything she had. All the while, the livestream kept running. His voice filled the internet, cheerful and calm as though nothing was wrong. A digital smokescreen for the horror unfolding in the real world. And chillingly, midway through the stream, a message flashed across the screen. No time to die. 3 hours into the live broadcast, the exact moment Natalie was attacked. This was no accident. This was planned. Morning light crept over Lurgan, a small town in Northern Ireland. It was Monday, December 19th. For most people, it was just another work day, but for Natalie McNally's friends and family, something felt immediately wrong. Natalie wasn't answering her phone. She didn't show up for work. No texts, no calls. Silence. This wasn't like her. Not now. Not when she was 15 weeks pregnant with her first child. By evening, worry had turned into panic. That night, her boyfriend, Stephen McCullough, drove the 20 minutes from his home in Lisbon to check on her. At around 10 p.m, he stepped into her house in Silverwood Green. The scene inside was every family's nightmare. Natalie was dead. She had been brutally attacked, stabbed multiple times, strangled, beaten. There were defensive wounds on her arms, proof she had fought to survive. Her unborn son was gone too. Police swarmed the house, The post-mortem confirmed it. Natalie had been murdered the night before, on Sunday, December 18th. The holidays were supposed to be a time of warmth and family. Instead, Lurgan was plunged into grief. And as detectives began piecing together the timeline, one fact became horrifyingly clear. Whoever killed Natalie had known exactly where she lived. This wasn't random. Natalie was 32 years old, born and raised in Lurgan, a town of 30,000 in County Armagh. She studied law at Queen's University Belfast before shifting paths into marketing and management. Clever, ambitious, determined. By 2022, she was working for TransLink, Northern Ireland's public transport company, running campaigns and shaping messages that reached thousands of commuters every day. But her real passions lay outside the office. Natalie loved animals, puzzles and football. Everton on the English side, Armagh in Gaelic. She threw herself into causes too, especially equality, becoming a familiar voice at local campaigns. And then there was family. Always family. Christmas was her season, the time to gather, laugh, exchange gifts, argue about football and fall asleep full of food. That December was even more special. Natalie had been keeping a secret, a quiet joy she planned to share with everyone on Christmas Day. She was pregnant, a baby boy. Her parents already knew. They were overjoyed, counting down the days until she would make the big announcement to the rest of her family and friends. That Christmas dinner would have been unforgettable, the kind people talk about for years, the one where everything changes, but it never came. Because on the night of December 18th, Natalie never made it past her front door alive. Her dreams, her child, her family's future, stolen. And as detectives started combing through evidence, they realized this wasn't just a brutal murder. It was personal. While Natalie's family mourned, another name began surfacing in whispers and police files. Stephen. To the outside world, he was an entertainer, a YouTuber with more than 40,000 subscribers, a man obsessed with pop culture. His channel was a mix of toy reviews, Doctor Who commentary, Star Wars collectibles and podcasts. The kind of guy who could spend hours arguing about lightsabers and action figures. He even worked part-time for the Belfast Telegraph, presenting himself as a voice talent. But beneath the persona, there was something else. Stephen lived just 20 minutes away in Lisbon. He and Natalie had been dating only a few months since August. By December, she was already pregnant with his child. To family and friends, the relationship seemed sudden, maybe even rushed. But no one could have predicted the darkness lurking behind his smiling live streams. Because while his subscribers knew him as a man who could chat endlessly about sci-fi, police were beginning to see something very different. A man with motive, opportunity, and the coldness to build a murder alibi in advance. Stephen wasn't just another boyfriend. He wasn't just another YouTuber. He was about to become the prime suspect in one of Northern Ireland's most chilling Christmas murders. At first, the evidence didn't point anywhere. A young woman murdered in her own home, a boyfriend with a clean alibi. It should have been open and shut, but detectives knew better. They pulled CCTV from Silverwood Green, Natalie's neighbourhood. It was a quiet cul-de-sac. One road in, one road out. On the night of December 18th, cameras caught a man walking into the estate at 8:52 p.m. He headed straight for Natalie's house, as if he already knew the address. 38 minutes later, at 9:30 p.m, the same figure walked out again. Around that exact time, neighbours reported hearing screams. Stephen leaned on his YouTube channel as a shield. He told police he couldn't possibly be the killer. He'd been streaming for hours that very night. But little details didn't sit right. During the live broadcast, Stephen never responded to comments in real time. He brushed it off. The streaming software's kind of messed up. I can't see the chat. Odd. Even odder was a sudden image that popped up midway through the 6-hour stream. No time to die. The timing was chilling. That screen appeared 3 hours into the video, the exact window when police believed Natalie was attacked. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was enough to raise eyebrows, because what looked like a solid alibi was starting to look more like a carefully crafted cover. Digital forensics stepped in. Experts traced the stream back and discovered something chilling. It wasn't live. It had been recorded 4 days earlier, on December 14th, then scheduled to play on the 18th. On January 31st, police arrested him. The theory, rage, betrayal, and a refusal to face fatherhood pushed him over the edge. He has not yet been convicted. 6 months had passed before anyone realised something was terribly wrong with 27-year-old Shraddha Walcar. Her friends hadn't heard from her, her father's calls went unanswered, and slowly it became undeniable. Shraddha had vanished. When police were finally alerted, their investigation led them into the dense undergrowth outside Chhatapur, a small city in central India. There, scattered across the forest floor, were decomposed human remains, body parts, unrecognisable and abandoned on a walking trail locals used almost daily. How could they have been missed for so long? And more importantly, who did they belong to? For a while, authorities feared this was just another nameless tragedy in India, a country where unidentified remains are sadly far too common. But this time was different. A desperate father's phone call cut through the silence, urging detectives to check if the remains belonged to his missing daughter. And soon, DNA tests confirmed the worst. The body was Shraddha's. What started as a family's desperate search for a daughter had exploded into one of India's most chilling true crime stories. A case that would grip the nation and shine a spotlight on the darkest corners of love, abuse, and betrayal. Born in 1995 in the Indian state of Maharashtra, Shraddha was raised in a modest but stable home. Her parents eventually separated, and she lived primarily with her father, Vikas Walcar, who ran a successful electronics business. Shraddha had a stable upbringing and access to education, enrolling in the Viva Institute of Technology for Mass Media, but left after a year to work full-time at a call centre. There, she met Aftab Poonawalla through Bumble. On the surface, he seemed charming, educated with a popular food blog called Hungry Chokro and thousands of Instagram followers. But cracks soon showed. They fell for each other fast, moved in together despite her family's objections over their fast pace and religious differences, and her father disowned her. Friends quickly noticed the relationship wasn't what it seemed, and by late 2020 it had turned violent, with Aftab even assaulting Shraddha and landing her in the hospital. She even showed up to work with bruises around her neck, prompting colleagues to call the police. But like so many cases of domestic abuse in India, nothing concrete came from it. Shraddha brushed it off, and no legal action followed. Her friends tried to intervene, but she continued living with Aftab, trapped in a toxic cycle of love, isolation, and fear. By 2022, the cracks in their relationship had deepened. The pair tried to patch things up with trips and visits to friends' homes, but those visits ended in fights so volatile that even close friends asked them to leave. They were both unemployed, increasingly isolated, and their relationship was clearly unravelling. Then came May 18th, 2022, the last day anyone would ever hear from Shraddha. Arguments that had become routine suddenly escalated into violence, and this time, she wouldn't walk away. When Shraddha's father reached out to police months later, suspicion immediately fell on Aftab. Investigators tracked her last known movements and financial activity, and the pieces began to fit together. Shraddha's last bank transactions were 2 transfers totaling 54,000 rupees, straight into Aftab's account. After that, her phone activity went silent. Friends received vague, out-of-character texts in late May, but police later questioned if those messages even came from her. Meanwhile, Aftab played evasive. When police finally brought him in, he refused to cooperate, giving vague or no answers. His apartment was searched, his devices seized, and soon witnesses, including Shraddha's friends, spoke freely about the violent, abusive relationship they'd witnessed. The evidence pointed clearly toward Aftab, but he stonewalled investigators. Pressure mounted, especially as the case leaked to the press and gripped the public. Courts even floated the idea of using a controversial narco test, essentially drugging him into lowering his inhibitions during questioning. Aftab resisted, but cracks began to show. Eventually, he started drip-feeding information to police, and what he revealed stunned everyone. Aftab admitted that on May 18, 2022, a fight over groceries spiraled out of control. He strangled Shraddha during the argument, later claiming she had become aggressive, Instead of calling for help or walking away, he pinned her down and ended her life. What followed was even more horrific. Using money he transferred from her account, he bought knives, saws, trash bags, and eventually a large fridge. Drawing on his culinary training, Aftab treated Shraddha's remains as though he were processing meat. He cut her into small pieces, stripped flesh from bone, and even ground fragments into powder. He stored her remains in the fridge, then, under the cover of night, disposed of them in the surrounding jungle, piece by piece. Her head was discarded in a pond outside town. He bought cleaning supplies to scrub the apartment and cover his tracks. For weeks, Aftab lived a double life, continuing to post online, acting as though nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Shraddha's friends and family grew increasingly frantic, but by the time her father called police, she had already been gone for half a year. When Aftab finally broke under pressure, his confession painted a horrifying picture. He described how he stored Shraddha's remains in the fridge and methodically disposed of them at night. He even injured himself while buying knives and saws, later visiting a doctor, a detail investigators confirmed. Forensic analysis backed up his account, and when police drained the pond he had mentioned, they found fragments of a skull. Digital evidence matched his story. Phone records, bank transfers, and location data placed both Aftab and Shraddha's devices exactly where he said he had been. This wasn't just a crime of passion, it was a calculated cover-up, carried out with chilling precision by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Aftab stayed smug and unremorseful throughout. In November 2022 he was arrested, and investigators compiled a massive 6,000-page charge sheet packed with forensic and digital evidence. Despite confessing, he pleaded not guilty, dragging out court proceedings with appeals and lawyer changes. He even demanded special prison perks, bottled water, new clothes, extra recreation, which were denied. Outside, public outrage grew, with demonstrations calling for the death penalty, while inside he faced threats and attacks, including an attempt by masked men with swords. Paranoid and isolated, he trusted no one. For Shraddha's family, justice felt painfully slow. Her father led the fight for the harshest punishment, and the case became more than a tragedy. It highlighted femicide, domestic abuse, and the risks of ignoring warning signs. Her therapist revealed recordings of Shraddha admitting she feared leaving Aftab, convinced he would kill her if she tried. Those words proved heartbreakingly true. The case remains open, with the nation still awaiting sentencing. Shraddha's case is one of those stories that lingers long after the headlines fade. What started as a whirlwind romance ended in unthinkable violence, exposing how quickly love can turn toxic when red flags are ignored. Every delay in court, every fresh detail from investigators, has kept the wound open for her family, who are still fighting for justice in her name. At its heart, this isn't just a crime story. It's a tragedy about trust, manipulation, and the devastating price Shraddha paid for believing she could make things work. Her recordings, admitting she feared Aftab would kill her if she left, now feel chillingly prophetic.